Who Gets to Decide? A liberty-based podcast that brings a little piece of sanity to a confused society drowning in a culture of craziness. And here is your host, Seth Martin.
Well, all right. What's up, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Who Gets to Decide. This is Seth Martin, your host. Thank you for joining me this evening. Glad you're here and always happy you're listening. This is episode 628. Well, you can see on the screen I've got a thumbnail or whatever of Candace Owens. And I've been listening to Candace Owens a lot because she is hard after the truth behind the Charlie Kirk assassination. And I know she's being criticized a lot. And maybe you're one of those people that's criticizing her, and that's okay. But I think there's something to what she's discussing. All she's doing is asking questions in my mind, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think, just like a lot of people, I think that the government's narrative is BS, to put it politely, and nobody seems to be interested in some other scenario except Candace Owens. And I don't know why that is. Some people have posited the idea that a lot of these other influencers are being paid by Jewish donors in America that don't want Israel involved in this, or by NGOs. I don't know. Who knows where the money could be coming from? That's the thing about money. It's fungible, right? So it can come from anywhere and go anywhere. And normally, anytime more than $10,000 hits a bank account or leaves a bank account, there's lots of questions from the banking system that are posed if this happens in, let's say, your banking account. But if it happens in people's banking accounts that have been whitelisted, to use a cybersecurity term, then there's no questions asked of those people. And, you know, this is just the world we live in today. There are people that are connected, that are in the club, so to speak, that are not questioned. They can do whatever they want. They can break any laws they want. They can kill anybody they want. They can do anything they want, and nobody will question anything. And then there's the rest of us that have to, if we go 5 miles an hour over a speed limit, you know, we're pulled over and hauled into court and prostrated in front of a judge and forced to take defensive driving, and just the whole circus. And you still have to pay. It's all about the money, is the way I always see it. And I don't know, it's just interesting. I think Candace Owens, she was very much part of the political scene until just very recently. It's one of the reasons I didn't listen to her before, is I just thought it was too much about politics, and I'm not interested in politics. It doesn't. We're going to touch on that a little bit today, that what does Democrat versus Republican really matter when you've got stuff like this going on? You got people that are on the outs that can just be killed. They can be sidelined. They can be run out of business. They can be sued out of existence. There's all different numbers of ways that the connected class can get rid of you if you get too close to the truth. And I think Candace is getting very close to the truth. And even if she's not, she's asking a lot of questions, a lot of uncomfortable questions that nobody, by the way, is interested in answering. So I thought we'd play today kind of what's going on there. She's getting a lot of criticism from other influencers on the right, a lot of influencers, and not from people like, not from any of the people I listen to. And I don't know if that means I'm listening to the right people or the wrong people, but the people I listen to are not criticizing Candace Owens. In fact, they're cheering her on. It's these people that seem to be more connected to the Republican Party, the Israel lobby, these more closely tied, just connectedness type of relationships. The people that are actually honestly and earnestly trying to question authority and the government's role and everything are being called conspiracy theorists, or being called all kinds of names. We're going to hear some of those names in a minute. And I wanted to just wade into this a little bit because I think it's really important who you listen to. most of us are working and we don't have time to track the news and really dig into what's happening in the world. I don't even have that time. I'm simply bringing an opinion to you that really comes from some of these other people, and sometimes I'm putting my spin on it, okay? Because my spin is always, it's about the money. And I'm not talking about money in general. I'm talking about fiat money or dishonest money. That's my big shtick, is I think all these problems go away eventually over time with honest money. But people like Candace Owens are they're more at the surface, where most of Americans are, by the way. Most of the Americans cannot see the connections all the way down to the money. And I try to spend a lot of time pointing out those connections, but it's very difficult for most people to see. And we're going to do a show on affordability, I think, and because the president's talking about affordability and everybody's talking about affordability. So I wanted to do a show on affordability because that gets right to the money. That is the money issue. But when you get more to the surface around these political issues, I think what Candace Owens is seeing and what she's talking about is very much a big part of kind of what's going on in our country. Just some background here. She's really taking a lot of personal risk in trying to expose these things, right? She did this whole thing on becoming Brigitte, which is about Brigitte Macron being a man and all this kind of stuff. And so the Macrons really hate her. And then she's doing all this stuff with Charlie Kirk, which seems to be connected to the Israel people don't seem to want all this being talked about. And she's uncovered recently that there's like a hit. Some French Foreign Legion or the French government and these people have put out a hit on her. And so she's been very nervous. Even Megyn Kelly asked Kash Patel about that. Point blank, hey, there's been this threat on Candace Owens' life, and she's made some allegations about the French government. Are you looking into that? And he gives this answer, non-answer, where he says, we're interested in looking into anybody, any government that's threatening one of our citizens. And he never really answers the question. And as far as Candace Owens knows, this threat is still out there. And then you got Tim Pool, we reported this the other night, is people are driving by his house and shooting guns, firing off shots in front of his house. And this is unnerving. And some people are upset about this because they're saying, oh, we need to quit fighting amongst one another and we need to just all get along. And Candace is like, screw that. I don't care about the midterms. I don't care about getting along. And I can just really relate to this. Some of you might be listening and you're like, no, I think we should be all getting along. And it is important who wins the midterms. And I don't know. I've lived enough life to know that no matter who wins the midterms or who wins the presidency, the trajectory does not change. Okay. So I know that. So I'm in kind of Candace's camp here. I don't really care who wins the midterms. As far as I care, Democrats can take over the whole House and Senate and get about turning this whole thing into socialism. The quicker that happens, the quicker we can take back our government or just get rid of it altogether and just live in 50 different states. But right now, there's just a lot of criticism of Candace Owens, and Tim Pool seems to be the biggest critic of hers right now. And so I just wanted to play this because I think this is completely unacceptable of Tim Pool. And I just don't know. His audience, his listenership is going down and hers is going up. This particular video that I'm going to show you has like almost 2.2 million views. In the court of public opinion, Candace seems to be winning. More people are listening to her than are listening to Tim Pool. Now, maybe more people were listening to her to begin with. I don't know the numbers. But way more people are listening to her now than listening to Tim Pool. And so I just don't think this whole, well, I don't think Israel's involved, or I don't think the deep state's really a thing, or I'm worried about the midterms. I don't think any of these things are helping any of these influencers out there. I think if you're telling that story and you're not seeing, your eyes are not open, then your audience is dwindling. And so I just thought we'd play this real quick. And also I want to play what you're going to hear her refer to Milo Yiannopoulos in his interview, Tim Pool's interview of Milo Yiannopoulos. We're going to play that in a second after we play this, but I want to let you know that she's talking about something specifically from that interview.
The coordination of an assassination attempt, which involved Israel and French intelligence agencies. Now, on that note, I am obviously taking a lot of personal risk to get out the truth to you guys pertaining to what is happening to Charlie Kirk. One of the easiest things in the world is to be a critic of Candace Owens and a part of the people who do not have the courage to prod this federal narrative. Among those, of course, being Tim Pool, who has now dedicated hours and now is trying to signal to the public that I don't have security, which is untrue, but he is trying to get me harmed. I don't know what I've ever done to Tim Pool to deserve that at all, but Tim Pool has had some very choice words for me, which were trending last night on X, and I would like to share that to you because he thinks it's an act of bravery to attack me in this moment. So take a listen to Tim Pool.
Candace Owens is a f***ing evil scumbag. She is a degenerate. She is burning everything down, and she's gloating and smiling while she does it. And you know what you told me? She has no security. She doesn't deal with the shit we have to deal with. She's a piece of shit. She's making everyone else suffer, and all of these conservatives out there that send me these messages have no balls to call her out. More and more people have started doing it. They send me these messages. Good for you, Tim. Good for you, Tim. I wasn't the first person to do it. I'm not going to take credit for that. But don't DM me like I did something for you as you power, scared that she'll put you on her thumbnail and claim you benefited from Charlie Kirk's assassination, which he's doing to me right now.
Yeah, that was the...
I'm done with these people.
She has security, just not on the level of you.
Oh, yeah, the one fat guy you mentioned with no wall and no barrier in a suburban neighborhood with neighbors. She doesn't give two no one's out for her. She's lying about all of this. You told me you went to her house and she's got a 4-foot wall and one fat guy, and she doesn't give a about her security. Meanwhile, I get bullets fired at my property, and I have to go live in the middle of nowhere. And I got strangers coming up to my house in Maryland, breaking in. I got people showing up and beating up the residents who try to live there. How the am I even supposed to sell this property?
All right, so clearly he's upset, but what's happening, of course, there's no excuse for whoever drove by his house and fired the gun like 3 times or something. That's unacceptable. And unfortunately, that's the world we live in. People don't like what you say, and they just think it's okay to point a gun at you and shoot you or hit you in the face or whatever. I don't get it. I don't know why we're living like that, where words are so frightening to people. But I just want to say, Tim Pool really came up in this whole woke culture thing. So it's like Ben Shapiro. Ben Shapiro really took off. His show really took off when the go woke, go broke kind of thing was going on. And they were pointing out the woke culture and all the problems with it. And they were right, okay? But if you really look at something like the woke culture, where did that come from? What was it all about and everything? It was all fabricated by the government. And so, yes, people railed against it, and yes, it was horrible, and everybody was fatigued, about hearing it over and over again. But to me, this problem that we're actually experiencing, and some people are starting to touch on, people like Candace Owens, is a much bigger problem than the government favoring transgenderism. Or to me, it's just another group that they're privileging. Black people get privileged. Handicapped people get privileged. There's dozens of groups that are privileged by the federal government. The problem is that privileging harms these groups, really. They think that there's some benefit to being privileged, but it's really a harm. And you can see that with the woke thing, right? People just recoiled against it immediately. And people like Tim Pool, Ben Shapiro, Ben Shapiro especially went to colleges and had arguments with people about woke behavior. And of course he crushed, these arguments are just stupid. These people that were advocating for all that and safe spaces and all this ridiculousness. But that's where Tim Pool came up. He really didn't come up, let's say, I don't know, like say Dave Smith, who really came up during the lockdowns around COVID, or Clint Russell, who really came up during the lockdowns around COVID, where it was really liberty-based. And so his compass is, I think, off a little bit. And a lot of people's compass is off. I'm not picking on Tim Pool. I'm sure he's a nice enough guy, but a lot of people still had their salvation in, oh, the Republicans need to win the White House or the House or the Senate or whatever it is. And I think what's different about Candace is she's finally seen that that's all bullshit. She's decided now that doesn't matter, because if you can become such a target that these powerful groups can just execute you on live TV in broad daylight, then what does Republican Democrat mean? And I think she's right. I agree with that, which is why I always rail against this. It's like that doesn't even matter. Voting doesn't matter if there's 300 people in the world that decide how the U.S. government goes anyway, right? What does voting matter? It's the same kind of thing. So that's, I don't know, a little bit of background on Tim Pool and where I think he came from and why I think he's struggling now a little bit. It's not because of Candace Owens. It's not even because of the Charlie Kirk assassination. It's because he doesn't have the right vision or the right tuning in his perception to see that this is about more than the Republicans missing the midterms, which he's been talking about is important to him or something. And anyway, let's finish playing up Candace Owens, and then I want to jump to Milo Yiannopoulos, because I thought his critique was very, very telling as well.
So there's a lot to unpack there. First and foremost, what you are seeing right there is on a display of testosterone. Men that speak to women like this are not tough guys, okay? What you are seeing is actually a display of estrogen. Everything he is doing there is somebody who is not a man, he is not tough, and he would never dare to speak to a man like that, right? People that find that very easy. Secondly, Tim Pool doesn't even have the intellect to understand that we put him in the thumbnail because he accused me in a full episode with Milo Yiannopoulos, which we showed and contextualized, of being someone who benefited from Charlie Kirk's assassination. So he thinks he's being accused. No, you accused me of that in like a actually, I think it was 2-hour episode with Milo Yiannopoulos, in which Milo defended me and explained that I am not to blame for the lame excuses that the feds have given us regarding Charlie Kirk's assassination, and that if we do need to have some spiritual searching in terms of what the Republican Party has become, that the time for that is now, okay? So this little, and I really like, he's a small person for this, a very small person who is also theatrical, Timothy Smollett, who pretends every year like people are trying to kill him. He's a chronic fence sitter, okay? Pretending like he is braving the wilderness for being what? The 110,000th person who's making a video about Candace Owens in the wake of Charlie Kirk's assassination. He thinks he's pioneering that. Are you out of your mind? It's only the safest thing you can do. What?
All right. Yeah, she's criticizing him pretty hard, but then he criticized her very hard. So I want to say something about the fence sitting. I think that's a big problem. It's a big problem in the media. We've talked about it in the context of, oh, well, let's say Barack Obama's president, and people that criticized George Bush for something because they're Democrats won't criticize Barack Obama for the exact same thing, okay? And vice versa. Barack Obama gets criticized, and then a Republican comes in, it's Trump or whoever, and the Republicans won't criticize Trump for the exact same thing Obama did. This is a big problem. I equate this to fence sitting. It's okay if my guy's in, but it's not okay if my guy's not in. And the problem is, this really never leads to a better situation for us, the people. And I agree that fence sitting, we used this quote the other day, that any compromise, the Republicans need to get in there and they need to compromise with the Democrats, or the Democrats need to compromise with the Republicans. Any compromise between food and poison results in death. And the underlying message there is that when you're dealing with principles, it's like, okay, let's get in there and let's compromise on the Second Amendment. No, the Second Amendment is a principle, okay, or free speech. We need to compromise around free speech because social media is run amok or whatever. No, that's a principle. It is in concrete. It's in stone. It cannot be compromised about, okay? You can compromise on tax rates. How much are we going to tax people? Things like that. In my view, you really shouldn't even compromise on that. There should be no taxes, no direct taxes at least. If you want to have a tariff on the whole country, on everything that comes into the country without any kind of favoritism, in other words, if it's 20%, then it's 20% on steel and it's 20% on plastic toys, okay, and everything in between. None of this, we need to shore up our steel industry, so we're only going to charge the steel industry a 5% tariff. No, that's bullshit. But I'm all for getting rid of taxes. I don't want the federal government to know who I am. I don't want to have a social security number. I don't want to have a relationship with the federal government. In fact, I don't want a federal government at all. But the point is, fence sitting, especially when it comes to principle, is very, very dangerous. Very dangerous. And quite frankly, I think we have in our political sphere where people do what I'm doing right now, there's a lot of fence sitting. There's a lot of compromise. And that's part of the problem. That's part of the reason we are where we are. And so I tend to agree with Candace Owens about that. And I think Tim probably is that way. He probably is more of a politico than he is somebody who's got some vision for America that has anything to do with liberty or freedom or any of those types of things. Now, I'm sure he's for free speech and gun rights and everything in the Bill of Rights. I'm not questioning that. But just the fact that he's talking, and you're going to hear in a minute, I'm going to play this other interview where he talks about, here's the problem, and he starts talking about the midterms. No, that's not the problem. That is not the problem in America. All right, let's jump to that now. All right, so let me set the stage here. This is Tim Pool's show, Timcast, and that guy with the mink hat on is Milo Yiannopoulos. Now, some of you might not know who Milo Yiannopoulos is, but he was a big deal about, I don't know, the first time Trump got elected, 2015, 2016. And then remember we had all this censoring. Remember before Elon Musk bought Twitter, they were censoring people and kicking people off platforms. The president of the United States, the sitting president of the United States, Donald Trump, was kicked off Twitter. He had over 100 million followers on Twitter, and he was just kicked off. So there was a lot of censoring going on at this time, and Milo Yiannopoulos got hung up in all that. So the thing about Milo Yiannopoulos is he's a very politically savvy guy. Now, he's weird and he's a gay guy and he talks fast and sometimes his points are over your head a little bit, but he knows exactly what he's talking about when he's talking about politics. So I thought it was really interesting, kind of his take on Tim Pool's take. So we're going to listen to Tim Pool's take first, and then we're going to jump into Milo Yiannopoulos and let him explain to Tim Pool, no, this is not what's important. Candace is right, and you're basically wrong. And he tells him that on his own show.
Just listen to what he's saying.
I'm listening to what he's saying, and it sounds like he's being affected by these cowards he's talking to.
And he's sticking to his guns. I think that's admirable.
You're not that, but
there's a big picture, and the big picture is this: there is a loose coalition on the right of various ideologies that came together because there was a unified, there's an enemy in wokeness, in insanity that was destructive. It's largely been routed. The right's not ripping each other apart. And
don't you think it's necessary in light of what Trump has been doing in the White House? The fact that he is
indeed,
that he is once again the president of Jerusalem and not the president of the United States.
Oh, come on!
That he is once again. I don't want to hear this from you. That he is once again releasing Jewish fraudsters who ripped off poor people and specifically in the executive orders saying they don't have to pay the fines back, so they don't have to pay back their victims.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of that.
But I'm saying, like, isn't it maybe a good thing that when it doesn't matter so much in a midterm versus when it matters a lot in a presidential election, that the right gets its you know what together, and that people have the opportunity to say, maybe some of it was Candace, but maybe most of it was Trump. The fact that the midterms were an underperformance, and have the opportunity to say some of it, because some of it is what Donald Trump is doing.
I completely agree.
When Donald Trump,
I disagree.
I agree that Donald Trump is dropping the ball.
Yes, when Donald Trump said, if you are, and I think I know why this is, because I think that Trump was probably a confidential informant for against Jeffrey Epstein back in the day.
I agree with that. Yes.
I think he probably helped the FBI take Epstein down the first time. That's the only explanation I can see.
Based on what?
Mike Johnson said it.
Tell you. It's the only.
Mike Johnson said it.
What did Mike Johnson say? What did Mike Johnson say? I missed it.
And then he walked it back the next day saying, "Oh, I misspoke."
I couldn't hear a word. What?
Mike Johnson was asked a question at a press gaggle, and he said something to the effect of, that's why Donald Trump kicked Epstein out of his club. That's why he was an informant to the FBI.
No, it's explicit. He said Trump was an informant.
I know. That's why I said he was an informant to the FBI.
Forgive me, sorry.
Yeah, he was saying this chain of thought.
Oh, I missed that.
Then everyone went, holy sh!
And then he rolled it back.
And the next day he said, no, I didn't mean it.
I misspoke. But in addition to that, and I think more importantly and more persuasively, because people do misspeak all the time.
Okay, before we get into that, I want to jump into this, because the first part he said, all he was saying really was, isn't it better now to be having this internal battle? And if the Republicans lost the midterms, then there could be some retrospective that says it's Trump's fault. He screwed up. What did Trump do? He said, are you still talking about that creep Epstein? And he pretended like that was nothing. And there's a lot of things actually that Trump has done that a lot of people voted for him to make a stand on some of these things. And wouldn't it be better now if the only cost was we lost the midterms? Now, the risk, and I've mentioned this before, the risk to Trump is that he gets impeached, and for real this time. Like, they'll impeach him for violating his authority as president by blowing up narco-capitalist boats in the high seas. He could actually be removed from office for that, or bombing Iran. I don't know. There's things he could be impeached for that are real things, not like in his first term he was impeached for just a completely made up thing that wasn't real and he wasn't guilty of, and he never did. Huge difference, right? Anyway, I agree with Milo Yiannopoulos. Yeah, if you're going to look at it from a political standpoint, and Tim's right about the wokeness, but the wokeness part, that had already been more or less conquered once Elon Musk bought Twitter. People started to push back on that, and the Biden administration kind of let that go. But what was not moving at all is the Epstein files. Nobody was looking into that. Nobody cared. Nobody said anything about it. Nobody was looking into any of these crimes under the previous administration, all the crimes under COVID. And what about Fauci? What about all these guys, They broke the law. But what about just the release of the COVID virus and all these things? People had just started to notice that, man, these institutions don't seem to be for the American people at all. And I'm going to vote for Donald Trump because he's a big fat middle finger to all these institutions and all these people, all these permanent people in government. And that's why I'm going to vote for Donald Trump. And Milo Yiannopoulos is right. And for him to get in there and then just ignore all that stuff and just pretend like he never said anything about it, he never said he was going to do anything about it, This is a big problem for Trump. And I don't think he even knows that it's a problem. He thinks everything's great. And I think the biggest problem is yet to come. We're going to have a massive calamity in this economy. The Fed just lowered rates again. Inflation's going to start going back up. Inflation has never come down. In other words, there's never been any deflation. So not only are prices not going down, they're still going up. They're just not going up by as much. And people are getting crushed. We're going to talk about this, and probably in the next show, we're going to talk about affordability and where the source of inflation really comes from, where high prices really come from. And Donald Trump is not doing the right things to get rid of that. And there's going to be a financial calamity under his watch, I believe, and it's going to drive him right out of office probably. Or he's just going to be worthless. He's not going to get anything done after that. So let's listen to this other thought that Milo Yiannopoulos has, because I think this is as important, if not more important. He basically makes the point that I've been trying to make about how important some of these topics were to the voting public and how it's his fault that he's just discounted these things and kicked all his supporters to the curb.
Some of the awkwardness.
Not Mike Johnson.
Sorry?
Not Mike Johnson. Very intentional. I know the man
okay,
fairly well.
So maybe it is a more powerful than I think. But when Trump seized up in panic, because that's what happened over the subject of Epstein.
No, he didn't.
There's a limited number of explanations for that, where he kept making.
I agree with Milo.
He kept making very, very obvious missteps designed to piss off everyone who loves him most, like Marjorie, like me, everybody who loves him most. People who, and I'm not saying that I put him in office twice, but I did the first time. I did help. I was a big component in the first time. But a lot of people who put him in office were like, what? Because Jeffrey Epstein, as Bannon has said, and who would know better than him, it turns out.
You're going to quote Bannon, who consulted for Epstein?
I just said who would know better than him, as it turns out.
I just want to make that very clear for anybody listening.
I just said who would know better, as it turns out. He said that Epstein was the key that picks the lock, right? Of all of the kinds of things that people are asking, like, what is going on here? Why is this like this? And why is it? Epstein was one of the central ideological planks of MAGA teleology. Like, why does the world work like it does? Why do things look weird? Why do those people keep getting away with it and those people keep not getting away with it? Jeffrey Epstein was considered by everybody who voted for Donald Trump as a central pillar of understanding that we would unlock, and it would be like a code where bits of the universe would get like decoded for us. Like, oh my goodness, it's because of that judge. It's because of that. Everybody had that expectation, and there isn't one person who voted for Donald Trump who did not want and did not expect the Epstein files to be released immediately, in full,
I did not have that expectation. I did not vote for Trump.
Okay, fine. Everybody except George, of course.
No, that's not true. There's so many people. I voted for Trump for many other reasons.
Okay. Yeah, I think he's right on about that. I think Trump just felt like he could manage it. That maybe this Epstein thing wasn't as important to people as he was told or whatever. And he obviously knew that it was at some point, because he did the thing where he brought all the influencers out and they had the white binders and they're holding them up and all this stuff. And then those were released and people started to say, well, there's nothing new in here. What did he release? He didn't release anything. And so the pressure came back. And then Pam Bondi was running around saying there's nothing there. There's no there. Kash Patel was saying that. I've seen the files. There's nothing there. There was just all this nothing burgerness. And this was a real problem because, just like Milo Yiannopoulos said, people were looking around and going, nothing about our country makes sense. The institutions hate us. The politicians hate us. They don't seem to care about our well-being. They seem to be worried about other countries more than us. People get in trouble but never get prosecuted. People that shouldn't be in trouble are prosecuted to the full extent of the law. This is insane. And he's right when he says people kind of thought that the Epstein piece picked the lock. Like that explains something. Okay, I can see that if Epstein had dirt on all these people and he's blackmailing people and with the help of Israeli Mossad and with the CIA, okay, maybe I can see how the world works like this. But we got to get to the bottom of that. We got to understand that. We got to get rid of that. We got to root that out and have a huge perp walk and get rid of all these people, right? And so, but then he just acted like there was nothing there. And I think he way underestimated people's willingness to look at that and go, oh no, you're not going to do that. No way. No way, Jose. And the other thing I think Trump is underestimated is just this third wave media or whatever, this third way or second way or whatever, the non-corporate media. When you had ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, Fox, MSNBC, you could control the narrative. We have a history with the CIA being involved in media, right? So it's not unbelievable, really, to see that the CIA might be involved in controlling the narrative and paying news agencies to report on some things and don't report on other things. But with this kind of new media out where you have people like Candace Owens or Tim Pool is in this group, Dave Smith, there's just a lot of people in this space and people trust them, right? They're authentic and people are listening to them and have a relationship with them in a way that they don't feel like they're being lied to. And they're not being lied to in most cases. They're not being lied to. Now, what's happened since the October 7th deal and Israel's kind of propaganda campaign to make themselves not look so bad and the fallout around this just complete destruction of Gaza is you've got some of the influencers, some of them are being peeled away and they're being paid. They're being paid to post things negative about people like Candace Owens or Dave Smith or whoever. Josh Hammer and people like that are being paid, probably. We don't really know. I don't know for sure, but that's the allegation, that they're being paid to have their opinions, to promote their opinion and to share that opinion with their audiences and go on different platforms and share that opinion. And so now what it's looking like is the divide is now between people who are willing to lie, okay, and toe the party line versus those that appear to have principles and aren't willing to lie. And so I think that's one of the reasons Tim Pool's clientele or his listenership is going down, because he's starting to his audience, it's starting to look like he's falling on that side that's lying, and he's going to be paid to lie. Now, look, I'm sure he's under a lot of financial pressure. His audience numbers have been going down. These guys are the reason they're making money is because people listen to them. But if people stop listening to them, then they don't make any money because it's 100% advertiser paid. But meanwhile, he's still got all these security costs. And now he's going to probably have to increase those security costs because people are driving by his place and shooting guns in front of it. So you can just imagine that this is creating a lot of pressure for Tim Pool. And that's probably a really tough place to be. But don't lie and make sure if you're in the business of telling people the truth, or at least the truth as you see it, okay, then that's something you have to earn. And it could take you years to earn it. And it could take you about 5 minutes to lose it all. And that's kind of what's happening with some of these people. A lot of people went all in on posting positive things about Israel. And it's just obvious when you look at X, you can tell who's doing that, right? And a lot of them are getting kicked to the curb. And now, but for the income they earn from Israel or from the Israel lobby here in America, they wouldn't be making any money because their listenership is going down. Their popularity is going down. And some of these people are feeling the pressure and they're blaming Candace Owens. Okay, because Candace Owens, one of her best friends was Charlie Kirk. He was assassinated on almost live TV in broad daylight. It impacted her in ways that most of us probably are not going to understand. And she has committed herself to digging into this until it hurts bad. And it's potentially destructive. It's potentially destructive to the fabric of America. But if it's true, then what are we talking about here? How can it really hurt us? All right, with that, I'm going to wrap up the show. I really appreciate you guys coming in. This was episode 628. You can subscribe to the show on YouTube. You can search it under Who Gets to Decide. For some of you guys who are listening, if you could come over and just at least watch one show and maybe like and subscribe, that would help the algorithm. by all means, keep listening. I think I mentioned that I listen to the shows I listen to. I listen in the car, and so I understand the convenience of that. But I do want to try to take advantage of the algorithm that YouTube has. So with that, I want to wrap up. Thank you guys for coming in. Thanks for listening. Come back in a couple of days. We'll have a new show for you. I think we're going to do something on affordability because the president has pivoted. I don't know if you guys have noticed this. He's pivoted to affordability. He got Powell finally to lower the Fed funds rate. We'll talk a little bit about that, about what that means, what that is, and whether or not that's going to help you in your life in general, and what that could mean for inflation as an example. All right, with that, I am going to check out. Good to see you guys. Good. Thanks for coming in. Peace.